English villages have... Oh, come on, I'm sorry. English villages have an abundance of history, and Sawtry is no exception. In this film we explore some of the more interesting aspects of the village. Although not attempting to provide a complete doomsday account of life from the year dot, you'll discover why. For example, the Romans were here. We'll show you a field with a circle and talk about a building that looks old. It is actually fairly new, as well as some others that simply aren't here anymore, all gone in the name of progress. You'll hear stories about village life, times before houses had running water and going to the loo involved a bucket, when it took all day to wash the laundry and a week to dry it. You'll see Sawtry from the air and witness the progress of village development through time, using up-to-date computer-animated maps. In addition to all this, you'll hopefully learn just a little bit more about a number of local organisations, meet village characters, and we'll even explain the origin of some of the many road names. Just keep watching. There's a lot of history in Sawtry, it's just having the time to look. But the real tricky bit is knowing where to start.
There's no better place to start than where I stand now, near the historic sign beside All Saints Churchyard. Over to my right is Tort Hill Field, and over there is a big circle about 40 yards in diameter, because this was the gun emplacement of Cromwell's during the 17th century, during the English Civil War. Now the cannons were near the bank of the circle with the barrels pointing up to the top. They would have had wooden stakes stuck in and also protection each side with baskets. And in the middle would have been the cannonballs and the gunpowder to keep out of the way of the firing cannon. They had a big square embankment round the circle one with an entrance at the bottom where the soldiers camped. And they had tents of soldiers, but the officer would have had a horse and he would have rode into Sawtry village and billeted himself in a house there. Now, the cannon can fire over a mile. Whatever size it is, it can fire a mile, even the little ones. So they had a good range, and to Conington it's about within a mile, and I should think they could reach Glatton Road, the B660 from here, and also south they could fire a cannon shot all the way down there towards, I should think, the Red Wings garage. And also the Romans used this site in the old days, I should think, as a lookout point down the old North Road, then the Ermine Street. The Roman settlement was actually underneath the southbound carriageway now, and it was, well, they dug right down from the hill, it was a hill, and they dug right down quite a long way, so the Roman settlement really would have disappeared completely. It's been dug away, but they found a lot. The Romans were here because they invaded us in AD 42, and they came up from London, the 9th Legion, and they took about 2 years around a year to 2 years to settle this area quite forcefully with their troops. And on the way they built Ermine Street, and settlements developed each side of Ermine Street. So we think that's how the Sawtry could have started, with the Romans having a sort of little chef sort of thing between Godmanchester and the River Ouse, Dura Brevi. And this would be a good stopping place for the troops on their march through. Well, it's very nice to see water in the moat again, because in the old days it was a moated site with a manor house on it, and it was full of water. But then in 1939, when they dug the gully away for road improvements, it drained the water all out of the moat. Because before then it used to run into the moat from the ditches. But now they built the A1M and banked it all up. The water's come back again, and it's rather nice and pleasant to see. Picture a timber frame building, like them you see in some towns, with wattle and door between the timbers. And the early house would have had shutters, but not windows, and later on it could have had windows.
Across the road lies the site of St Andrew's Church and Graveyard, the church being easily identified on account of the 3 small dormer windows built into the south side of the roof, presumably in an attempt to let in more light. The church, featured in the Domesday Book of 1086, was finally demolished in 1879, but the site still remains, preserved as a conservation area.
This graveyard of St Andrews is full of history, very interesting place to be. And of course it's got the old people of Sawtry who built Sawtry up over the years. Every gravestone tells a tale. There's many sad ones here. One sad one is about 3 children and the father dying of the smallpox. There's 2 or 3, or more than 2 or 3 cases of that. And of course they died of the flu, they're bad case of the flu, they'd die. And of course sanitary wasn't very good, so it wasn't very nice in them days. We're a lot better off these days than they were.
Standing in St Andrew's churchyard in the 12th century and looking southeast towards Wood Walton Church, an impressive structure rising above the lowlands would have been Sawtry Abbey, a Cistercian abbey founded in 1147 and once a resting place for the cortege of Catherine of Aragon on her final journey to Peterborough Cathedral in 1521. However, despite its grandeur and importance, it failed to survive the dissolution of the monasteries in 1539 and was destroyed under the orders of King Henry VIII. Today, little, if anything, remains of the abbey. Walking up to All Saints' Church, a visitor would be forgiven for overlooking the stones standing against the wall, but this innocuous pile of rubble is actually the remains of Sawtry Abbey. Talk of history, one would imagine the local village church would have seen all changes possible, but appearances can be deceptive.
Well, this isn't the first building that's been on this site. In fact, there was an older version of All Saints Church that was demolished in 1879. So although this looks as if it's been here for ages, in fact, it's only been around for about 120 years. Well, the old church we know was here at the time of the Domesday Book in 1086, and it was very similar in design to the existing building, except that the old building had a tower, and in fact it was the tower that was one of the problems in terms of the condition of the building. The bell here, which we actually ring still every Sunday before services, is one of the oldest bells in the whole of Huntingdonshire. The original All Saints had 2 bells, and one of them got taken away to one of the schools in Peterborough, and unfortunately it's just completely disappeared. But the other one has been retained in this existing building, and it's there up in the bell tower. There are 1 or 2 interesting things in our church, some of which came from the old All Saints building. There are a number of coffin lids which are here, which date back over a number of years. There's some brasses that people come to look at from far and wide for Lemoyne, who was one of the lords of the manor. There are some ancient oak chests which used to hold the church documents and things such as that. And also we've got a number of stained glass windows. All Saints Church is surrounded by its own churchyard, and they contain the remains of many of the people who lived here in our village. Unfortunately, as the village has expanded, there's been a need for more grave spaces. And initially, this was taken account by a new parish graveyard adjoining All Saints. That too is now filling up, and so a new graveyard has been purchased adjoining St Andrews.
St Andrew's graveyard features an iron gate with a hexagonal symbol in the middle, a symbol which can also be seen in the village sign on the green and gives a clue to the origin of the name Sawtry. One of the earliest records of Sawtry shows it with a spelling of Saltrium, which roughly translated means landing place for sellers of salt. This was true, for much of the fens was either underwater or at least very boggy, and barges would regularly journey up to the quayside, now near Greenfields, to unload cargoes of salt, which had been produced locally in the fens through evaporation. Back to the village sign, and there's more. 4 coats of arms for a few of the many lords of the manor. An acknowledgement of changing diets, that's the geese and eels. Bullocks, representing the old Bullock Road, at one time the main artery in and out of the village. Then there's the original parishes of St Andrews, St Judith's and All Saints. It's all there, plus more, all on the sign, somewhere. The best way to get an overview of Sawtry is from the air, and where better to go than Conington Flying Club, previously home to the American Air Force flying daylight raids over Europe in B-17 and B-24 bombers, but today a more sedate approach to flying rules the runways. From the air, the scale of Sawtry is all too apparent. Plenty of houses, that's for sure, and a village perimeter that follows natural boundaries. And then there's the new A1M motorway. But what did the village look like? Just under 10 years ago, this was the scene, pretty much as Sawtry is today, with a few exceptions. No motorway, so no Bill Hall Way. And the prefabs have gone in Park Road. And you could still join the A1 northbound by driving down Tort Hill, a road that's still there today. So there we are, Sawtry back in 1993. Travel back even further in time, and this is the picture. In 1945, just a handful of roads. No college, no Gloucester Road, no Manor Drive, no Newton Road, no Deer Park Road. In fact, a completely different village. But one thing it did have was pubs. The most southern pub in Sawtry at the turn of the century had a sign that depicted a black bull. Known to locals as simply the Bull, the Durham Ox was situated at the junction of St Judith's Lane and Green End Road.
Mr. Charlie Scottney and his wife Ella kept the pub there, and there used to be a little room on the side where my dad and a few other cronies used to play dominoes on a Saturday night. And it's still there today. It still looks like it ever was, the Durham Ox.
Moving slightly further up the village, the next pub you'd find was, and still is, the Bell. But despite the odd sign, pubs weren't much more than a converted front room.
But they were basically just somebody's houses, you know, and these rooms, the Bell particularly was like Mrs. Parker's house, and the tap room was one of her rooms.
The building's still the same, but there was more land with it than there is now, and my granddad he had a couple of cows in the field and used to sell milk. He also had some horse and carts, which he done contracting with when he was at the Bell. And in them days, they used to have the big old barrels with the brass taps on, that you put a glass under and just drew it off then. There were no beer pumps and that like there is now, and I got into the cellar and got a glass because I was dry, it was warm, and I turned the tap on and turned it on alright because I had the flow of the beer behind it when I turned it on, but when I tried to turn it off I couldn't turn it off and the beer all ran onto the floor, and I daren't go and tell anybody at the time, but I think they realised who'd done it. Yeah.
It was more young people got in, because my sister-in-law Vera used to play the piano, Hubert Baxter used to play the drums with her brushes, set in the corner, and on a Saturday or Sunday night, we used to go to another pub down there, that was packed because all the land girls and the wafts of the girls got in there, so all those young blokes it was a drawing plaster for us to go down there to it. We used to have a sing-song in there, and up there we had a couple of punch-ups and one thing and another and such like, and we used to have a good time in there. Altogether we had a really, really good time in there, because that was a trendy place of the village them days.
Part of the Bell used to be a bakery and, on account of its consistent warm temperature, occasionally doubled up as the village mortuary. This could possibly then help to explain the strange goings-on.
I came down one morning about 7:45 on my own, and I was just opening the curtains, and as I moved along near the fireplace, all of a sudden I just heard this scrape, like a scrunch sound across the floor, and I looked across over my left shoulder, and this chair was just moving across the floor with this eerie scraping sound and stopped, and it must have moved, I suppose, a good 2 feet, and I just sort of looked and thought, pulled the curtains open as quick as I could, and then ran down the side of the pub and just opened as many curtains as I could and double-checked everywhere that no one was pulling a prank on me. But without any shadow of a doubt, that's what I saw. And it really went cold, and the chair just sat there, and it took me about half an hour before I could compose myself to put it back again. After I'd had my sort of experience with the chair, quite a few of the regulars said, oh, that'd be the old customer who's, once again, a ghost who's been seen by several people. And he frequents that corner, and his favourite sort of spot was by the fireplace, leaning on the mantel with his pint. And that's his little area, so he's often been seen standing there, leaning against the fireplace, enjoying a quiet beer.
So next time your pint mysteriously disappears, you could always blame someone else.
Oh, has anyone seen my pint?
The Cross Keys stood at the junction of Green End and Gidding Road, often called Johnson's Corner. Travel back in time to the very early 1900s, and this would be the scene. Sadly, it's gone, demolished to make way for the Greenways shopping centre, built in the 1960s. Suffering a significantly better fate than the Cross Keys, the Chequers still remains to this day, proudly overlooking the village green, which was once a focal point for many a village function, including Feast Week and May Day celebrations, the village fair and the local hunt.
That was a favourite pub in the village, and there used to be more beer spilt when it was Sawtry Feast Week there than there is drank today. And that's the truth. Spilt outside in the yard. They had real big booze ups there, you know, and everyone, the big farmers used to go there. And if they were too busy, you could go and help yourself to a pint and leave the money on the barrel if you wanted to. They were quite happy to do that. The atmosphere was quite good. They talked about everything, and they played cards, they played dominoes and darts.
But dominoes and darts aren't to everyone's taste. How about a big satellite television showing all-day football?
It wouldn't have went down in those days when you think of the people that used to be in the Chequers playing dominoes and that sort of thing, and darts. I can't see as the music they've on now and the satellite TV would have went down very well in there in them days. In fact, I think if somebody had brought a satellite television in those days in the Chequers, it would have soon been flung across the road onto the green.
One fella used to go in there, he lived down Fen Lane, I forget his name now, but when he had a few, he used to get safety pins there and pin his lips together and do tricks like that. Put one through his nose as well.
There's quite some characters there.
One character known to everyone was Linnet.
And every bit of mischief or fiddle, Linnet were in it. He were in it. And he was a good old character, he was.
He used to go across miles looking for mushrooms and then come back and sell them, perhaps to the same bloke whose field he'd pinched them from. He was a real character.
He didn't like it because I used to go and get mushrooms. He thought they all should be his, you see. So I used to get up early mornings and go before he came because I knew he wouldn't get here too soon. And if there were some mushrooms there, I used to leave the stalks for him to see and put a little notice up. I ain't going to tell you what I put on it. Can't tell you that.
Leaving the congenial atmosphere of the Chequers, the next pub you'd stumble across was the Oddfellows Arms in Church Street.
Well, it was like the extension of the row of houses, but where you went in the door, if you didn't go in the yard to go into the back door, there was like they'd put on a little bay window type thing, whereby they'd have what they call a settle. It's still there, the house. It's very similar to what it was, but it wasn't noticed. It didn't have a pub looking front to it or anything.
One place that did look more like a traditional pub was the Royal Oak.
That was very popular. People used to go there. I mean, you could walk across the A1 then. You could see a car coming in the distance, and perhaps if you come out at 10 o'clock at night, you wouldn't see any. I mean, absolutely clear.
The Royal Oak, no longer around, one of the many buildings demolished during the latest A1M widening scheme. Before the 1900s, though, Sawtry had many other drinking establishments, inns. Part of this building, for example, in Tort Hill, was actually Alehouse Cottage, serving locals during the time of the French Revolution in 1789.
Newton Road, named to record the Newton family, who were prominent figures in the community. Most older residents will remember Hubert Newton, who owned the village bakery. He was also, at one time, the chairman of the parish council.
Originally, this was home to a row of 5 or 6 cottages called Mellors Row, named after Colonel Mellors. The old people's home, which was opened in 1971, has been built on the original site and is named Mellors Court.
Cavendish Close was named after William Lord Cavendish, who was the Earl of Devonshire. He purchased the land known as Sawtry Moyman from Oliver Cromwell back in 1608.
Warrencroft is named after Frank Warren, who used to run the Oddfellows Arms in Church Street. In the old days, all pubs used to have paddock land, and this area went with that pub.
Ermine Way was named in acknowledgement of Ermine Street, the famous straight Roman road which ran all the way from London to York via Lincoln.
The farm by All Saints Church was called Manor Farm, and you could lead the cattle to Manor Farm down a track near this road, which is why it's called Manor Drive.
A spelling mistake resulted in this road being named Bloomfield Road. Actually, it should have been named Blomfield after Arthur Blomfield, who was the son of a bishop. Arthur was responsible for the building of the new All Saints Church in 1880, using stones from the old St Andrew's Church and also some from Sawtry Abbey. Isn't that interesting?
Bill Spriggs, or Spriggy as he was affectionately called, owned and ran the coal yard on which these houses now stand. The coal yard ceased trading in the mid-1970s and then lay dormant for several years. Bill died in 1993, aged 88, and the land was finally redeveloped in 1999, suitably named Spriggs Close.
We used to go out and walk about and that. There was nothing organised for us. We used to make all our own fun and amusement in those days. We used to, to go up to the wood at Avialable Wood, we used to go up there. I can remember sometimes we'd walk up there 2 or 3 times a day to Avialable Wood, go up there in the mornings, come home and have a dinner, go up there in the afternoon, come home and have your tea and go back up there.
Well, when I was a kid, where the doctor's surgery is, there was a farm, the White House Farm it was called. Muck carting time or hay making, and we kids used to, if they'd let us, ride on the cart. You know, it was lovely. We used to stand around with big sticks When the thing went round, you know, if the rabbits used to pop out, you'd try and wallop them with the stick, catch a rabbit.
Scrumping was one of the things. We used to go scrumping in the old orchards, get a few apples and that in those days. That was another thing we used to do. Raid somebody's orchard to get some apples or pears or something like that when they was in season. But we used to do things. I remember, as I say, Becky Jolly's shop, where it was on the front where Mellors Court is now. And coming home from school, I used to sometimes just open her door and she had a bell on the door. If you just opened the door about a foot, the bell used to ring because she weren't in the shop. She was out in the back doing her housework in those days, and she only used to come into the shop when the bell rung and someone went in. So I used to ring the bell and then run to get round Church Street corner before she got there. But she used to manage sometimes to just get to the door and look out to see it before I got round the corner.
The village green was filled with the dodgems and the jungle speedway and the sideshows and swinging boats, and because I could never go on those because I was sick. But all around the fair, people used to have caravans, you know, Thurstons and Fendicks and Thompsons. It was great. A topping up night on a Saturday, they used to call it, Saturday night.
Education was originally undertaken at the old school hall, initially with boys and girls in one big room. The Women's Land Army building, home to Lancashire and Yorkshire girls during the Second World War, became the infant school. The village community college opened in 1963. In 1972, the infants acquired their new school. 10 years later, the new junior school was opened, thus completing a very brief picture of education in Sawtry. Well, that's if you don't include the Agricultural and Home Economics College, now the Youth Centre. Oh, and the preschool playgroup, based in the original telephone exchange, but you knew about them, didn't you? 6 times a year, residents receive a free local magazine published by an organisation known as Coresco. But who are they?
Coresco stands for Sawtry Care and Resources Organisation. We're a registered charity based in Sawtry. We run lunch clubs and day centres for the elderly and the housebound. We also run a community print shop and try and meet other needs within the community. It was started by a group of active parishioners who wanted to take over a couple of projects already running. They were led up by Marjorie Dybeck, who later became the first organiser of Coresco. The Coresco Centre was handed over to Coresco in 2001. It is such an improvement that really there's no comparison between the two. It's warm and cosy. People enjoy coming here. Numbers were dropping off in the old building because it was so cold. But here people seem to be comfortable and hopefully get a warm welcome.
The whole building was dreadful. It was an old shed that was falling to pieces nearly. Cold. In the winter especially, the heating would go off, and when this new building came along, well, it's like being in paradise, I think, against the old one.
On Mondays and Tuesdays, it's the Luncheon Club, a chance for residents to get together, have a chat and a nice meal.
Joan and Nancy and Eunice help with the food, you know. And it's nice coming here for the company, really, because it makes us poor old souls that have all day on their own.
I can't praise them enough here because everybody's so good. And what do I get up to? Playing Scrabble, playing bingo, having lots of fun, and enjoying myself.
I know it's difficult to imagine now, but at one time Green End Road was just surrounded by, well, green. That's why it's called Green End Road. But it wasn't so long ago that the bottom half was called Slough Lane.
Moyne Road, named after the Moyne family. One notable individual was Sir William Lee Moyne, who was the lord of the manor of Sawtry Moyne and who died in 1404. A brass depicting him and his wife can be found at All Saints Church. Looking past the woods Alconby, the hill over which the new A1M disappeared is called Stangate Hill. Actually, the crest used to be high, but the new road has been cut through, making less of a steep climb for the traffic. In the days of steam engines, though, the driver would have to fill up the engine's tank with water at the bottom of the hill. If he didn't, he probably wouldn't have enough steam to reach the top.
In 1989, Sawtry Parish Council purchased 15.1 acres of land, designated to be the new Sawtry sports field. Local builder Roy Green was heavily involved in the building of the new clubhouse, and the whole facility is known as Greenfields, in recognition of all his hard work.
Chapel End gets its name from the chapel houses, which was situated on the east of the A1 opposite St Andrew's Church. This lane led up to them, except they're not there anymore. They were knocked down years ago.
This is an easy one. Fen Lane is called Fen Lane because it leads to the fen.
The Bones family were once large landowners in Sawtry, and Sir Robert de Bones was Lord of the Bones Manor of Sawtry. He was also Bishop of London and reputed to have been born in the parish of St Andrews.
Where the club is now, Club Car Park was a reservoir, and beside this reservoir was a separate well.
We used to go and fetch buckets and keep it in the pantry and jug it out, and that was our drinking water.
It was a pump, just a pump. You used to pump your own water and put your bucket over the thing and pump it up when you got your bucket full. Dad used to have a yoke with the bucket on either side.
In my young days, people used to drink water out of the ditches. It was clear. You could see fish swimming in it.
As boys, we've drunk water out of a land drain pipe that run into a dike, where it runs into a dike and runs out in the dike. I mean, when we've been out in the fields and that one's been running, we'd drink that because it was so clear and so clean.
That road down to the allotments there was a lovely ditch beside that, and the water used to come right from the hills. And the watercress used to be waving in the water, beautiful stuff.
The Amicable Society was one of several organisations in Sawtry, providing care for its members long before the days of unemployment and sickness benefits. During the Second World War, their former headquarters became home to two families and in 1955 was purchased by the current owners. Modernisation includes disabled access and also inside toilets, because originally you had to, well, you can guess.
Sawtry WI was started in July 1919. So we shall be 83 years old this year. Of course, life has changed for women so much in the intervening 83 years that they have such a choice of leisure activities nowadays compared with their mothers and grandmothers. I know the Jam and Jerusalem image has stuck, but everyone seems to enjoy their meetings, so I'm sure there's a great future for us.
Two doors down is a building formerly known as the Hut, originally a tin-roofed wooden structure, but now brick, more of a soundproofing measure than a design statement. Reopened in 1964, the Sawtry Ex-Servicemen and Working Men's Club caters for members with regular entertainment, good value drink and a games room, including two full-size snooker tables, one being a 1920s Riley, purchased new when the building was first opened. On the far wall are various photographs, one showing the hut before the outer brick wall was added in 1976, and another showing a man with a horse, easily overlooked, but the reason the facility exists to this day. Ben Irish was a local landowner who lived in the manor house by the green. His main claim to fame was the racehorse he owned, Papyrus, or Papyrus as the locals say, a rank outsider which won the Derby back in 1923. He gave the land on which the club now stands to the ex-servicemen of Sawtry for all time in recognition of their part during the Great War. Unfortunately, not all those who left to serve returned, and this plaque on the wall provides a lasting memory to those who died. Later, the names of those lost during the Second World War were added. Like many a historic character in Sawtry, Ben lies in All Saints churchyard. He died a month before his 65th birthday, with a funeral service conducted by the Archdeacon of Huntingdon. Today, His grave is hidden amongst the grasses, but his legacy lives on, helped along by a committee who have worked hard to ensure the continued success of the hut.
Sawtry had no electric, no water, and nothing, no facilities really.
We had a brick-built copper in the shed outside. We used to fill it up, light a fire underneath it. When it boiled the clothes in, and when they were clean, lift them out with a copper stick.
I used to turn the handle, and Mother used to guide the washing through the mangle to the two rollers. And then, of course, it was pegged out on the line.
I could remember sometimes Mother would have a line full of washing out and the line would break. And if you'd washed them by hand, it weren't like breaking when you washed them with a machine these days, just slap them back in the machine. You've got to wash them all again by hand if the line broke, because the lines in those days were mostly down by where the garden were, where they used to grow the vegetables. So once the line broke, they were on the garden, and so they were all dirty again. Yeah.
What do you expect? This road is named after a big green leafy thing, a laurel bush. Big deal. Did you know that they have poisonous roots? Chestnut close was so named to identify the close proximity of the 11 chestnut trees that stand in the area. Being fairly rare, the trees are the subject of a preservation order. Behind this cul-de-sac is a dike that runs towards the A1 motorway. An old map shows Stanch Hill Bridge, under which the A1M now runs, but I guess Stanch Hill Bridge Road is just a bit too much of a mouthful.
Dome Close, not named after the Dome, which is just a bit south of Newcastle upon Tyne, but actually named after the Durham Ox Public House, which was just one of the 6 pubs that used to be here in Sawtry. Despite closing down as a pub years ago, it's still here on the corner of St Judas Lane.
Aversley Road was named after Aversley Wood, which is the wood by Holborn Hills for honey allotments.
Keggy Patworth, Biddy Bates, 2 men on the night side.
Well, of course there was no water toilets, just buckets with a seat built across the top.
Well, they went door to door, didn't they, emptying the toilets, which were all outside.
You used to just go and sit on it and do your business in the bucket and wipe yourself.
And you had the little square pieces of newspaper, of course, because there were no toilet rolls.
And I remember that because it was all a bit shiny in them days and the print used to come off, but I always had a way of sort of scuffling mine a bit first.
We always knew when it was coming round.
Because there was nobody around when the car was about, because they couldn't stand the smell.
You know, the old little old saying that they used to say when I was a boy, in days of old when men were bold, paper wasn't invented. They wiped the arse on tufts of grass, went away contented. Cut.
In the 1960s, the policy of the District Council was to create 2 key rural centres to service smaller surrounding villages. Sawtry was an ideal choice, having excellent facilities. Hey, it even had its own village fire station. And here's the original one, home to horse-drawn tender and still overlooking the village green. But development was running rife.
Well, when I came into Sawtry in 1970, I think every road in the village was just covered in mud, where vehicles from every contractor who was building houses were just coming onto the village. And I met this wonderful character, George Cheney, and became involved with him. And he said, you know, we've got to somehow get them stop going any further, because every piece of field that was beyond was being sold by the farmers for these developers, and they were just buying it up so they can keep on extending outwards.
Finally approved in 1976, the village plan, a 10-year plan, was an innovative blueprint document, including proposals for the posting of a formal village boundary and a capping on building preventing overdevelopment.
The completion of that 10-year plan in 1976 is just being completed now in 2002. The 10-year plan. It's taken that long to develop it out, so you can see how massive it was at that time when we got it stopped.
Sawtry was a little village that really had nothing given to it. It had no playing fields or anything like that at all. And we looked, and of course no farm or anybody was selling us any land around the village.
Negotiations for the new sports ground, Greenfields, was completed in 1988. One pitch, however, remains missing, a legacy to the new A1M and an agreement reached between the parish council and the road developers.
They wanted certain subsoils to make the foundations for these flyovers. And so they took it from us and made this wonderful lake for us, because I think everybody's enjoying it now, and it's great to, another asset in the village.
Despite the loss of one football pitch, there are many advantages. Just ask the geese. In addition to a wildlife habitat, the lake also provides recreational facilities and the welcome irrigation of the sports field during those dry summer months, if we have any. But an abundance of water hasn't always been an asset.
Sawtry was the last of the fens to be drained, and so there's fields around it. And of course the Sawtry Internal Drainage Board, the old chairman used to say, well, it's your own fault, but you shouldn't have built on it. Everybody knows that floods, Sawtry lived with its floods. I mean, even Church Street flooded, and the little cottages there, and the people there took the stuff upstairs when they flooded. And it was part of the village life before we came in to develop it.
Sawtry has come a long way. As far as major development inside the boundary goes, that's really about it. There will always be other challenges, our own full-time policemen or more facilities for the youngsters. But a village doesn't run itself. It's the parish council who deserves some recognition. A final word then from a young lady who retires from public duties at the end of this year.
Sawtry is a great place to be. I've been parish clerk now for over 14 years. It's been hard work, the people are great, but I'm really looking forward to being in my garden next year.
We've missed out loads. We haven't talked about the village lockup or the original swimming pools, both of them, the Royal Observer Corps lookout post, missed that one. We could have talked about the Feast Week supper, working on the farm, or the railways, the village today, the many clubs, for example, the relaxing atmosphere at the Bowls Club. Or life in the fast lane with the motorbike club. Every year they take Easter eggs to a local children's respite home. But all good things must come to an end, and as far as hold on, it's not that guy with the dune buggy again. What's Herbert doing there? Oh well, that's progress.
There was a cannon emplacement to guard the A1, A1, what they said, it weren't the A1, it was the Great North Road, sorry.
The trouble we've got is churchyard and graveyard, you see, because I will be picked up on that if I get it wrong.
Really, what's the difference?
Because a churchyard belongs to the church and directly adjoins the church. A graveyard is in fact what belongs to the parish council.
And it won't surprise me, in years to come, you'll be able to put £2 coin or euro in the slot and pull the beer yourself. It won't surprise me that don't happen that though.
One of the things I could change, the parking outside the co-op, yeah, I'd change that, yeah, definitely. If I could sort of have a wish and sort of change the parking outside the co-op, probably that's one.
He bequeathed the land to done it wrong. I'm as bad as the blinking kids.
The Beans family were once large landowners. I'm so sorry, I can't get it into my head.
Village life is different to the big towns where people don't know each other. Here, we always used to pride ourselves on knowing who was at the end of the street and in the next street, and I think that helped a lot. But we should never lose sight of the fact that we live in a village, and that's different to a big town.